Welcome back. Spring means our pastures are starting to green up, and that means it's time to protect our cattle from worms and parasites. The bugs can literally eat the profit right out of a calf. Reporter Todd McCartney had the chance to visit with the experts at the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville to learn more.
You're losing 5 to 10% of the productivity of that animal just due to levels of worms that you can't even assess. I mean, the animal looks fine, but it's not going to produce 5 to 10% as much as it should be because the worms are there.
Well, the reason we deworm cattle is to improve their performance, which means more dollars in our pocket because we have more weight to sell.
Worms cost you money, even though you can't see them. They live in your pasture and easily move into the intestinal tract of your cattle. Worms impact feed efficiency and performance.
Health-wise, the more worms you have, the less healthy that animal is going to be because the other pathogens are going to have advantage in that animal because the worms are kind of detracting from the immune response capability. If the immune response is working on the worms, then that means some of that immune response will not be able to work on the other pathogens. Antimicrobials work better when worms aren't there. You know, that's been shown time and time again. Vaccines work better when the worms aren't there. In addition to those factors, worms basically decrease the immune response. Not only are the worms kind of causing a refocus of the immune response on them, the rest of that immune response is somewhat disabled just due to the presence of the worms there.
Well, the life cycle of the parasite's quite interesting. If we start out with the adults in the gastrointestinal tract, they mate and the females produce eggs, and the eggs pass out in the feces. And in the fecal pat, those eggs actually turn into larvae. And the larvae go out around the fecal pat, and they crawl up on the forage, and as the animals graze back by, they pick up the parasites again.
Timing is important when you deworm your cattle. The best time for that is in the spring and fall. If you're a stocker operator, it's a year-round job.
Generally speaking, if we deworm cattle 30 to 45 days after the grass greens up in the spring, in areas where there's significant rainfall and the grass is growing rapidly, it's best to go ahead and remove those parasites while we have the best forage condition and we're getting the most cattle gain during that period of time. And so it makes sense to maximize that forage and get as much return on investment as we can from that forage.
If you're a stocker operator and you're getting the animals every so often, you want to make sure you treat those animals when you get them so that you're killing the worms that they're bringing to your farm. You don't need to be getting an influx of worms from wherever these animals came from. The normal levels of worms that stocker animals have in Arkansas, if you run them for about 150 days, and that's the research projects we've done, about 150 days stocker calves, our treated stockers, the ones that we've completely take care of their worms, they will weigh 100 pounds more in 150 days than the control calves.
Spring isn't the only time to deworm. You want to make sure your cattle are worm-free going into winter.
So we'll pick up some parasites between the time it starts to cool off and frost. So it's important then not to have those parasites in those animals over the winter because they're costing us money to feed them, right? So it's important that we go ahead and deworm in the fall as well. And that also lets us clean up some of the external parasites that may affect cattle during winter months, such as lice.
Producers can choose what kind of product to use to treat the worms in their cattle. Injectable and pour-on products are both effective. So which one will work best on your operation?
Generally speaking, if you're concerned basically and totally about worms, you want to use an injectable product. If you think, okay, I'm going to take care of worms, but I also want some external parasite or extended external parasite help on my operation, then you want to go with a pour-on product.
Well, injectables generally give us a little bit better control of gastrointestinal parasites, whereas the externally applied products, the pour-ons, give us a little bit more broad spectrum control of external parasites, particularly the chewing louse of cattle. And that's more of a winter issue. In the springtime, a lot depends on what the producer needs to do, the convenience, availability of facilities. Those things come more into play. One of the great things about Sidectin Pour-On is it has a purple dye in it where you can actually see which animals you've treated.
Make sure you use the right dosage, whether you use an injectable or a pour-on. Product labels provide guidelines based on the animal's weight. If you don't use enough product, the treatment won't be effective and it could lead to parasite resistance.
When people go out and they deworm animals, they kind of ballpark, you know, how heavy the animals are, and they kind of form their own idea as to how heavy they think they are, and then they treat all the animals alike. You know, there could be a 30% variation, heaviest to lightest animal, but everybody gets the same treatment, which is wrong. So, which means you are mistreating probably about 60–70% of those animals. You know, some of them you give them too much product, very few, but most of them you're not giving them enough product.
Dose effectively. In other words, don't underdose. Make sure that your dosages are accurate based upon weights or some solid estimation. Dose to the heaviest animal within the production group so that we do not underdose half of it. If we dose to the average, we're going to underdose half of the animals. And then finally, we want to use the most potent molecule in the class. And for the macrocyclic lactones, the most potent molecule is Sidectin.
To get the best value out of your dewormer, make sure you administer it properly. Follow BQA guidelines for injectable products. Apply pour-on products in the right location.
Injectable products are all to be administered in subcutaneous fashion. We want to put those in the neck area, in the area forward of the shoulder, below the nuchal ligament. So there's a four-sided figure that beef quality assurance techniques suggests we place it in. And that's the area that is safest in terms of not doing damage to edible meat tissue. So we generally put those subcutaneously in the neck area. The pour-ons should be administered from kind of between the withers to the tail head. So we distribute them equally and they are absorbed efficiently.
Make sure the animal's dry and make sure there's no debris on that top line so all the product gets on that animal. That's a proper treatment.
It's important to determine how well your dewormer is working for you. Consider involving your veterinarian to conduct egg counts prior to and post-treatment.
If we're concerned that the product we're using may not be giving us really good parasite control, we can actually go in and do a pre-treatment fecal egg count and compare that to a post-treatment fecal egg count at 14 days post-treatment. Along with that, we'll typically do what's called a coproculture, where we grow the eggs out and we actually find out what species of parasite we're dealing with. And then we can evaluate the efficacy of the treatment. Now at 14 days, if we have significant numbers of parasite eggs still in the fecal, and they're composed of parasites that are pathogenic, then we have to stand back and decide, should we change products?
Dr. Yazwinski says that there's an important difference between generic dewormers and brand names. The doctor's research shows that generic dewormers aren't as effective, and producers need a dewormer that works to protect their profits.
Well, typically speaking, if we have an effective product, we get nice returns on investment. It's a matter of a few days before we regain the cost of treatment. If we look at the drugs compared to each other, these anthelmintics in this macrocyclic lactone class, there's a fair amount of variability in price. But generally speaking, the differences in performance versus the parasites is offset in a very few days, and after that, it's actually putting money in your pocket. We've looked at projections from numerous field trials comparing the different pour-on products, and consistently, Sidectin provides the best return on investment.
There's a lot of products that are available for worm control in cattle. The major categories are, well, let's start from the top of the list and work our way down. Kind of in that gradation there is basically how effective these products are. At the top of the list we have a milbemycin, and the only milbemycin that's available for use in cattle is moxidectin, and the trade name of that is Sidectin. From my research that I've done over the last several years, it always comes up showing the best, looking the best as far as an effectiveness standpoint.
Producers need to remember that parasite control always pays. If the animals are parasitized, removing those parasites brings us an improvement in performance. It brings us an improvement in feed conversion, which is all profit. It helps the benefit of the animal. Parasites being removed increases intake of the animals. All of those things are real benefits in terms of actual profitability of the livestock.
From the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, this is Todd McCartney, reporting for NCBA's Cattleman to Cattleman.
If you don't have a squeeze chute, pour-on products like Sidectin can be poured on a group of cows in an alleyway. To learn more about deworming techniques from the experts at Fort Dodge Animal Health, visit cattlemantocattleman.org.